How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's Q&A. So like any other week, if you want a chance of winning questions being answered in a video just like this one, make sure you drop a comment with your question. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the first question of the week. And it is, what are some common issues or causes of the P2646 code, which is directly related to low oil pressure on the older VTEC systems. So you typically when this code would come up, either one of the following would happen with the car. So it will either be very poor maintenance, leading to a clogged or sticking VTEC pressure switch right on the solenoid. So some other things, obviously, and that would be maintenance related as well, would be the car would be burning oil. It would start consuming that oil, of course, and the oil level would drop. We want to have enough oil pressure to trigger that switch, causing that code. Another thing that we saw a couple of times, and this kind of came afterwards, was sometimes some aftermarket filters for the oil were restrictive and causing not enough oil pressure to get to that switch, again, causing that code. And lastly, and this is all mechanical stuff, typically it was mechanically related. Sometimes it'd be like a broken wire, but typically this would be the issues. The last issue that I saw a lot of, and this is as the cars got older, there'd be an oil leak from this. Now that oil leak would be right at the solenoid gasket, and oftentimes that gasket would actually collapse and restricting the oil flow. Now it wouldn't be completely from sludge, it would be the actual gasket would collapse, forcing and restricting oil going into that solenoid. So that's some typical things that we saw failing. Typically, it would be one of those that I just mentioned. Sometimes it would be something, like a pin fit, broken wire, or an ECU or something along those lines. But 9 out of 10 times, it would absolutely be a mechanical issue. So hopefully it answers the question for you. All right, so you have a rough idle. Where do you start? Typically, a rough idle is going to be from a low idle or engine mount. So what I would look for is for engine mounts. That's going to be the first thing and easiest thing to check for. You want to go ahead and put it into drive or reverse carefully, apply the parking brake, and have somebody else in the engine bay looking for excessive movement. Now, when you go into drive, you're going to look for the front and the sides to kind of have excessive movement. When you put it into reverse, you're going to look for the rear mount and maybe some lower mounts and stuff like that. Now, all this changes depending on a mount setup. So typically back in the day, there'd be 5-6 engine mounts. Now it seems to be typically 2 side mounts and a couple of dog bowl mounts, kind of keeping everything together. And those dog bowl mounts typically do take the toll. Now, when these mounts collapse, typically there's a metal bracket connecting the mount to the engine, and that mount will rest on a mount bracket or the mount housing itself, causing that vibration. So that's going to give you some excessive vibration. And typically as you accelerate, it kind of goes away. Sometimes you feel it more, sometimes you don't, but it really depends on the situation. Now, another thing to look for is your throttle body or something along those lines, just having some carbon buildup and not be able to get to that target because there's some carbon blocking that airflow. So very simple to do at that point. You clean the throttle body, you reset it, and you're good to go. That's typically what we see here. It's going to be something along those lines. Now, when you add a load, let's say your AC, the idle is supposed to go up ever so slightly to compensate for that extra load. So if it's not doing that, then maybe you have something else going on. But typically a change in a load or something like that will adjust the idle just a little bit, make it go away, make it a little bit better. So that would be some of the things I would look for. If your car has higher mileage, it's probably one of those two things. Now, if it's a low mileage vehicle, maybe something else is going on, but that would be, generally speaking, what I would start looking there. So hopefully that's a question for you. Okay, so active grill, what is the operating conditions? That's really hard to say because it really depends and varies on the vehicle. Typically, it has to reach a certain temperature for it to open. If not on a highway, it's going to try to close it to improve aerodynamics. So obviously ECT temperature, so coolant temperature, if it has a trans cooler, or maybe trans temperature, something along those lines. Now, typically, again, on a highway, they try to close it until it's needed for that extra airflow. Some common issues and stuff that we see them failing in is they don't fail on their own, typically speaking. Usually, it's some sort of impact to where one of the blades is broken or jammed or something along those lines. Or, when there's sludgy and snow and stuff out or leaves binding and causing a bind, could definitely set a code. If they're trying to close and they're not closing, they're staying partially open, then obviously that could cause a code as well. Again, they work very well. Some cars have upper, some cars have lower, some cars have both. So it really depends on them. And typically on the sludge side of things, or leaves collecting or anything like that, it's the lower ones that get affected, not so much the higher ones. Now, when it comes to accidents, usually we see the higher ones breaking and not the lower ones. Typically, accidents happen or rear ends happen, and the middle of the car or the higher part of the car gets affected, not so much the bottom, unless if you ran over some sort of a barricade or curb or something along those lines. Then absolutely the radiator support could get pushed up and damage that, but obviously you would probably see something, and it would be kind of known that you should probably look there. So these grills will set some codes. So again, they work very well, and typically we don't see any failures, with the exception of some sort of accident or something causing them to bind. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so the next question is, have I seen idler pulley bolt breaking on the J series timing belt? So when you do a timing belt, oftentimes you may have to back that one up or remove it completely. Typically, I could get it out without removing it. It is tight, but it is doable 9 out of 10 times. Sometimes you need just a hair. In that case, I back it up just a turn or two. Now, the idler pulley will have thread lock on them, so if you back it up just a little bit, and even if you take it out completely, oftentimes there's still enough thread lock on there where you don't have to apply more. Now, certainly you could apply more. It does have red thread lock on it if you choose to do so, but the only time I completely remove it is doing an oil pump reseal, which you do have to remove. So again, 9 out of 10 times, I could get the water pump out without removing that. A lot of people have questioned me on that, but I have made some shorts, kind of in some stories on Instagram, proving that and proving them wrong. So 9 out of 10 times I can get them out. Now, the adjuster for the tensioner, so that's the one that pivots, the one I kind of demonstrated a week or two ago. That one you do have to remove and put onto the new water pump. Again, that one does not use thread lock on it, only the other one. And I don't see any of them breaking. So the question was, have I seen any of them breaking? And I have not. I have not seen a single one broken. What I do see broken is that adjuster. If you let the timing belt tensioner slap on it enough, then that end either gets pitted or it ends up breaking that end from all that slapping going around. Now, I have an Odyssey, like an 05 Odyssey in there, that is making an extreme amount of noise. If the customer approves the job, I'm going to try to make at least a short out of it and kind of see what goes on beyond it when you let it go beyond that point of the original just tapping or ticking. This one, I'm telling you, I have never heard one this loud. I think it's a combination of the piston tapping on the adjuster as well as the belt flapping around. It sounds horrible. So again, I haven't seen any of these break on any of these J series. So if you're a technician of both Honda or Acura and you see one of these broken, please drop a comment down below. But I have not seen any, and I don't remove that one 9 out of 10 times. So hopefully that's this question for you. All right, and last but not least, question of the week. And once again, if you want a shot at one of your questions being answered, make sure you drop a comment down below. So the question is do's and don'ts during a break-in period. So this question often is very controversial, and I'm just going to say and address what I do for my personal vehicle. So what I do is I grab the car, drive it. Once it's fully warmed up, I drive it the way I want to drive it. I'll rip it if I need to rip it. On my TLX Type S, I literally let it fully warm up. I drove around the parking lot a little bit. Then I absolutely wide open throttle it out of the dealer. Now, a lot of people say that's controversial. You need to let it break in, blah, blah, blah. And I simply don't believe in that. What I do believe in is absolutely you have to have all the coolant, trans temperature, all that stuff up to temperature before you go ahead and drive it hard. Now, don't do this on a cold engine. That, I think, is a bad idea. But once everything is warmed up, I think it's absolutely fine. It actually is good for helping this piston ring seal, things of that nature. That's what I believe in. Again, that's what I do. After that, I change my oil at 1,000 miles, then at 3,000 miles. So 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles later, being at 3,000, and then every 3,000 miles from there on. I do that on my TLX. I do that on my Pilot. My Pilot's got 92,000 miles. And my TLX has 37,000 hard miles on it with no issues. Trans seems to be good. Engine's good. Everything is operating as designed. So that's what I do. Obviously, most people are not going to drive their cars hard like that, but that's what I believe in. as long as everything is up to operating temperature. And please do your oil changes as often as possible. It's better earlier than later. Now, some people argue it's a waste of money. Great, I don't care. I'm gonna do what I believe in. I'm gonna do what I see work. When I see extended oil changes, whether it be full synthetic or conventional oil, it always ends up being trouble down the road at some point or another. So again, that's what I do. I'm gonna preach what I do, and that's just what I believe in. So if you have something that you want to argue, we'll go ahead and argue it or whatnot. Obviously, we'll be respectful to one another, but I'm always open-minded to other people's points of views because I think we could all learn from one another, and that's just how I see things. There's no reason you can't teach me something and I can't teach you something as well. And always the proof is in the pudding. So again, I practice what I preach. So that's what worked out for me ever since I started driving. And consistent maintenance will always go a long way. It's better to pay in small intervals than have to replace an engine or transmission that's going to cost you $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 down the line. So that being said, hopefully that answers the question for you, and I'll catch everyone on the next one.